Most people only use tomatoes fresh, then let the extras spoil in the fridge. But when tomatoes are cheap and in season, I turn them into this bright red powder that lasts for months. Just one spoonful can make soups, sauces, pasta, and marinades taste much richer. Hi everyone, I'm Tracy. Today I'll show you a simple way to make tomato powder using 2 secrets that help the tomatoes dry, quickly prevent mold, and still keep their rich tomato flavor. Be sure to watch until the end of the video because you'll see just how convenient it can be for everyday cooking. First, you'll need about 2 to 4 pounds of fresh tomatoes, and it's best to choose ones that are beautifully ripe and red. Then wash them by placing the tomatoes in the sink. Adding a little salt and some white vinegar, and letting them soak for about 5 minutes. This simple step helps remove dirt, bacteria, and other impurities from the surface. After soaking, gently rub each tomato with your hands and rinse it thoroughly under running water until completely clean. Then place them in a colander and let them drain naturally. Now that the tomatoes are clean, it's time to cut them. Here I want to show you 2 different drying methods, so I'll prepare them in 2 different ways. First slice, some of them very thinly, because the thinner the slices are, the faster they will dry. This cutting method is also quite important because it helps speed up the drying process and saves a considerable amount of time. My family eats tomatoes every day because they not only add rich flavor to meals, but they also contain vitamin C, vitamin A, potassium, and especially lycopene, an antioxidant that gives tomatoes their natural red color. What's interesting is that after tomatoes are cooked and dried, much of the lycopene is still retained and may even become easier for the body to absorb. Once the tomatoes are sliced, you can begin drying them. There are several ways to do this, such as spreading them evenly on trays and drying them directly in the sun. However, that method can take quite a bit of time. If you'd like to save time, as I do, you can dry them in an air fryer instead. Arrange the tomato slices in a single layer in the air fryer basket, making sure they do not overlap so the hot air can circulate properly. Set the temperature to about 176 to 194 degrees Fahrenheit, 80 to 90 degrees Celsius, and dry the tomatoes for 2 to 3 hours, depending on the thickness of the slices and how much moisture they contain. Every 1 to 2 hours, check on them and gently turn them so they dry more evenly. Now let them continue drying while we move on to another method that is just as quick, turning the tomatoes into a sauce and drying it in the oven. For this method, cut the tomatoes into small pieces. They do not need to be perfectly uniform. Just cut them into reasonably small pieces so they cook faster and allow moisture to evaporate more easily. One thing I love about tomatoes is that they not only add beautiful color to meals, but they also provide many beneficial nutrients that the body needs every day. Once the tomatoes are chopped, place all of them into a pan and cook over medium heat until they soften and release their natural juices. At this stage, I do not add salt or any other seasoning because I prefer their original flavor. If you enjoy a little heat, you can add some chili powder to suit your taste. Once you see the liquid separating, cover the pan and continue cooking over low heat for about 10 to 15 minutes. Stir occasionally to prevent the tomatoes from sticking to the bottom of the pan. As the mixture thickens and most of the liquid has evaporated, continue stirring and gently mash the tomatoes to create a smoother consistency. One important tip is not to blend the tomatoes into a puree, because that will release even more liquid and make them take longer to dry. By cooking the tomatoes first, you remove about 80 to 90% of the water, which greatly speeds up the drying process. Next, spread the cooked tomato mixture into a thin, even layer on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. The thinner the layer, the faster it will dry. Then dry it in the oven. Place the tray in the oven and set the temperature to about 167 to 194 degrees Fahrenheit, 75 to 90 degrees Celsius, for approximately 3 to 5 hours. Be sure to leave the oven door slightly open so moisture can escape more easily. Dry the tomatoes for several hours, checking on them from time to time. Now, all that's left to do is let the air fryer and the oven do the rest of the work. Depending on the method you choose, allow the tomatoes to dry completely until they are crisp and no longer contain any moisture. This process may take a few hours, but the results are definitely worth the wait. Once the air fryer has finished drying the tomatoes, take them out and check them. You will see that the tomato slices have curled up and can be easily broken by hand, which shows that they are completely dry. At this point, you can use them directly or grind them into tomato powder, just as I am doing today. Now let's check the oven-dried batch. After a few hours, the tomato mixture will be completely dry and no longer sticky. Simply remove the tray and break the dried sheet into smaller pieces. As you can see, both methods dry the tomatoes quickly and produce excellent results. Once everything has cooled completely, you can blend them into a powder. Now place everything into a blender and blend until you have a fine powder. After blending, pass it through a sieve to obtain a smooth, fine powder. Just look at it. The tomato powder is bright red, smooth, and wonderfully fragrant. To keep the powder fresh for a long time, proper storage is very important. Store it in a glass jar with a tight-fitting lid to reduce moisture exposure as much as possible. An important tip for protecting the powder from moisture is to place a food-safe silica gel packet inside the jar, or make a simple moisture absorber by wrapping 1 to 2 teaspoons of uncooked rice in a small piece of paper towel. This will help keep the powder dry and fresh for longer. And just like that, you have a convenient jar of tomato powder that can be used in many different dishes. One of the ways I use tomato powder most often is to make sauce for pasta. Simply mix 1 to 2 tablespoons of tomato powder with a little warm water and stir well. And you'll have a mixture similar to crushed tomatoes. When making vegetable soup, beef soup, or stews, all you need to do is add a little tomato powder to the pot. Tomato powder helps enhance the natural color, creates a richer flavor, and adds a natural tomato taste. Another way to use it is to sprinkle a little on snacks, baked potatoes, popcorn, fried eggs, or roasted vegetables to give your food a light tomato flavor and an attractive color without needing a lot of sauce. You can also add 1 or 2 teaspoons of tomato powder to marinades for chicken, beef, or pork. Tomato powder helps enhance the natural flavor, gives grilled dishes a more appealing color, and creates a richer taste after cooking. And that's how to make flavorful tomato powder that works well in everyday cooking. Be sure to save this recipe and let me know how it turns out for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel below to encourage me to make more homemade powder recipes. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.